Evening, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you all so very much for joining us. I'm Andrea Miller. I'm with Center for Common Ground. And tonight we are doing a very, very special Southern Voices. We're calling it Introducing the Douglas Commonwealth. This is going to be the name or the new name for what we think of as Washington, D.C. So, as most people who are joining us tonight know, D.C. statehood is one of our voting rights issues. And when D.C. becomes a state, Washington, D.C. will be what we call the federal enclave, where we have the Supreme Court, where we have Congress, where the real residents and citizens live. That will become the Douglas Commonwealth. So tonight we have three very special guests that you will be meeting a little bit later on. The Honorable Charles J. Moreland, Senator Mike Brown, and the Honorable Franklin Garcia. Our agenda tonight is I'll do a very quick introduction of Center for Common Ground because I have noticed that we have some new people. Thank you very much, new people, for joining us. We'll do a couple of campaign updates because we are a working organization. So I want to let people know what our next campaigns are going to be. And then we will bring on our special guests and they will talk with us about the Douglas Commonwealth. And then finally, a really quick what's next. Now, the mission of Center for Common Ground is to empower underrepresented voters to fully participate in democracy. In 2020, working toward that goal, we sent 9.4 million postcards to voters for voter registration, for voter pledges, and for vote by mail, and finally for get out the vote. We made 1.7 million phone calls and sent 2.9 million text messages for that same purpose. Now, we have a lot of projects. In the old days, our original and sole project was Reclaim Our Vote. We now have the Vote Equality Project. We have an internship program, Students for Justice. And we have a couple of software products because one of our board members is a retired Google engineer. And so he invents things for us. And in 2020, we ran the biggest billboard project we had ever run in our history. And many of you know we have an RV. And at the bottom right, you see a picture of the RV, and I think she was on one of her trips to Georgia. Now, coming up will be our new campaign at the end of July. Will be planning for the Virginia 2021 election. And as you can see, we've got a very interesting slate of candidates on both sides. In Virginia, we've got 5.4 million registered voters. 28% of those voters, or roughly a little more than 1.6 million, will be our target voters for Get Out the Vote. The Virginia State Legislature, the entire state house, in addition to 3 statewide positions, governor, lieutenant governor, and attorney general, will be up for re-election or election. When you look at our state house, you can see that our state house is blue. It is 55-45 is our current split. when we look at the outcomes by party, we had a very, very, very good year for voting rights legislation in Virginia overall, and a lot of the legislation we passed had to do with voting. 67% of the bills sponsored by the progressive side passed. And in the Senate, 72% of the legislation sponsored on the more progressive side passed, including a bill that basically gives Virginia as a state its own John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. So we did enact that here in Virginia. Doesn't have that name, we called it something else, but it basically does the same thing. If you try to discriminate against someone on the basis of race, religion, spoken language, or anything else that we can easily identify, the Attorney General will be up your, pick a part of an anatomy that it would be really unpleasant for somebody to be up in a moment. No questions. We didn't think there would be any. Now, our next project, one that we are working on and is very, very, very relevant to what we will be talking about tonight, is our Democracy Center project. Now, in June, we finished the paperwork this month for Alabama. So we will be opening, they will probably officially open their doors more around August, but we did finish the paperwork for Huntsville, Mobile, and Selma. So we are partnering with the Omegas. Richmond will officially open its doors on July 17th, although we did appear at a Juneteenth event, and we will be appearing tomorrow when Black Voters Matter is in Richmond. Roanoke had a very soft launch, and then we already had Florence and Hawkinsville operating. And we also are done with the paperwork in Monroe, North Carolina. So we weren't quite sure where to put Douglas Commonwealth if we're going to be done with the paperwork, but we're going to be adding Douglas Commonwealth. We'll probably have to make you a dot that just sort of sits out in the nothingness because DC is such a small, tiny space. We hope to have the Douglas Commonwealth operational by the time they do their, and we'll be talking about this later, March on August 28th. Coming soon, Augusta, Georgia, Cobb County, Georgia, Savannah, Georgia. You feel that Georgia theme going on, and then Charlotte, North Carolina. And these are just the beginning. All right, now for the main event. I want to introduce a person who has become a friend, someone that I really enjoy talking to. He's a lot of fun. His name is Charles Moreland. Charles was the first elected United States representative serving from 1990 to 1994. He got his undergraduate and graduate degree from Antioch University and his JD also from the Antioch School of Law. He is a lawyer who was admitted to the bar in 1980. Charles is kind of like me. All right, so he's more skilled. He's a skilled professional with more than 40 years of experience, government relations, drafting legislation, political consulting, fundraising, client interaction. I love this one. teamwork, and training with demonstrated abilities and advocacy for his clients and people who are struggling with addictions. Charles, thank you for joining us and welcome.
Andrea, thank you, thank you. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Good. Uh, I just want to let everybody know that I'm a retired lawyer. Now, my son is the lawyer in the family. He was admitted to the bar and sworn in last January. Um, Good evening. Let everyone who has breath give thanks to God Almighty for getting us through the pandemic of 2020. Okay. Uh, I also want to thank Andrea and the Center for Common Ground and each one of you for being here today and making this event possible. I say historic. This event is historic because tonight is going to mark the beginning of a new chapter in the history of DC's 220-year struggle to end taxation without representation in our nation's capital. I am honored to have served as Washington, D.C.'s first elected United States representative. We're also honored tonight to have with us Senator Brown, Senator Michael Brown, and Franklin Garcia. Senator Brown Senator, the current Senator Franklin Garcia is a former U.S. representative like myself. The Douglas Commonwealth Coalition is composed of current and former members of Washington, D.C.'s congressional delegation, in whom the citizens of D.C. have reposed special trust and confidence in their integrity and ability to advance the cause of ending taxation without representation by making D.C. a state. Well, we decided to organize and unite and bring in all the current and former members of the congressional delegation, along with our D.C. delegate and the elected officials of D.C., to unify the statehood movement. We also have been honored to team up with Joel Siegel and Harvey Wasserman and the Green organizations and a number of justice organizations. For 220 years, we have been petitioning Congress for statehood to make ours a perfect union. But the system of government that we have imposes on the citizens of D.C. a system of tyranny in its most shameful form. The citizens of Washington, D.C. are no more than servants at the banquet table of democracy. Yet, most of our citizens, the vast majority of our citizens, wake up every day and accept what would be unacceptable. If you took this system of government and took it anywhere else in the world, or certainly anywhere in the United States, they would pick up arms and shoot you dead like the founding fathers of our nation did. And so one of the goals that we have, and one of the reasons that I think it's great and the right time for establishing the Democracy Center in D.C. is that we want to educate our citizens and let them know that they are disenfranchised. A lot of D.C. residents don't fully understand what that means. And so the Democracy Center is going to allow us to teach D.C. citizens, to educate them about the importance of democracy. And just like was done in Texas, we're going to let the citizens of D.C. know that the Constitution makes them free, that they are free. We want to wake them up to that. The natural course of injustice is that of people who are oppressed will remain oppressed until they stand up against the oppressor. So our goal is to is to stand up. A man can't ride your back, they say, unless it's bent. So we plan a number of activities. We're going to be organizing, as Andrea mentioned, a Dream March on Washington on August the 28th in commemoration of the 1963 March on Washington. Uh, our vote in DC is suppressed, so we're going to join with green job issues and justice issues, individuals around the country who are fighting against voter suppression. But our condition in DC is a little different. Uh, so I don't mean uh, just the suppression that that's going on in Georgia and other states. I mean, in DC, we talk about suppression in the strongest sense. Suppression not just to conceal and sweep under the carpet, but suppression in the sense of defeat, vanquished, exterminated. Our rights in DC have been exterminated. We have no rights. And the disenfranchisement in DC goes beyond. Uh, the disenfranchisement in DC, there was somebody who was speaking in the background. But anyway, the disenfranchisement in DC has just taken away our freedom, and we operate under a system that they call home rule. Well, home rule uh, denies us the basic fundamental rights that other citizens inherit as a birthright. And it's more than just about a lack of representation in the House and the Senate. Every bill, every legislation that's passed in DC is subject to congressional review. And so that chills uh, the, the legislators. It chills, every law that DC elected officials pass. One example, let me give you. Some of you may have noticed until this year a tag that said "taxation without representation." Well, the slogan that the founding fathers of our nation used to 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 motivate the Revolutionary War was no taxation without representation. So I was amongst a group of people that tried to convince our council to say it the tag should be very specific and say no taxation without representation. Well, they were intimidated. They were afraid that they would make Congress angry, make Congress mad. So those are the kind of things that happen in D.C. And I think it's very important that everybody understands that D.C. citizens are affected in many, many ways by uh, this campaign of disenfranchisement, this system of disenfranchisement. Now, moving forward, we are planning a number of actions. Uh, uh, Something that is going to be. Can everybody hear me? Andrea?
Yes.
Yes, we hear you, but there's a whooshing sound in the background.
Yeah, okay. I think that is my fan on my laptop. I've heard that before. And when it gets hot, because it has been operating all day. So I hope everybody can hear me above that, and I apologize for that. In the meantime, uh, uh, Andrea, you told me to be bright, be brief, and be gone. So I want to just let everybody know that we're very thankful for everybody being here today. And ours is a movement whose time has come. And failure is not an option. We're going to stand up and we're going to demand DC statehood. And I want to welcome each and every one of you to the family of the faithful.
Thank you very, very much, Charles. I'm going to bring up Senator Michael Brown next. So what I'm going to do is bring him on the screen. So welcome, Senator Brown. Senator Brown is in his third 6-year term, as people sometimes refer to him as the shadow senator. What's really incredible about being a senator in the district is that this is an unpaid position. If you can imagine that, representing people in your community, and there's no money involved. So obviously, this is a labor of love. You are speaking to activists here who understand the whole idea of you do what you believe is right because you believe it's right. So, Senator Michael Brown, welcome and take it away.
Thank you so much, Andrea. We so much appreciate your activism. You're not only someone that I've known for several years, but you are just a personal inspiration to me. And I so much appreciate the Center for Common Ground inviting us to come here tonight and speak. And yes, as Andrea said, um, I'm not paid. And to be honest with you, I've had the position for 15 years now, but for the first 7 years of my tenure, I didn't even get any money to cover my own personal expenses or to have a staff or anything else. In the last several years, I now have an assistant who's underpaid and overworked, and we do have a little expense money, but for the most part, the position is a labor of love. And I started it because my great grandfather enlisted in the Continental Army when he was 17 years old and fought for the rights for himself and his posterity for the blessings of liberty. And those blessings have not been passed on to me or my wife or my children. And I'm mad about it. My wife and I have paid taxes in Washington, D.C. for 30 years. My children have paid taxes in D.C. since they're now full grown. And this is something that needs to change. We're the only nation in the world that does this. And really what it is a political anachronism which has long outlived its usefulness. 150 years ago, it may have made some sense, but today it's absolutely a partisan battle, and that's all it is. It's all about two Democrats. Now, they just held a hearing in the United States Senate on our bill that would make us the 51st state. And first, let me tell you why we want to be the 51st state, because all states come into the Union on equal footing. And I think as Charles pointed out, we can't make our own laws. We can't spend our own tax money. The tax money that we collect from things like property taxes and sales taxes and all the local taxes are subject to the approval of Congress. The President of the United States signs two budgets. He signs the national budget and the budget of the District of Columbia. And this is just crazy. It's a system which Charles already explained to you is called home rule. But we had a very famous activist in Washington, D.C., who used to call it home fool, because it really is not what democracy is supposed to be. So we've worked very hard to try to change this. And as Charles pointed out, we're going to have a march on the anniversary of the March on Washington. And you all know Martin Luther King, Dr. King's famous speech on the Mall. And let me further explain why I do what I do, how this all came about. In 1796 in Tennessee, the territory that was Tennessee at the time wanted to become a state. So they elected two United States senators, sent them to Washington, they lobbied for statehood, and they became a state. Since then, 5 other jurisdictions have done exactly the same with exactly the same result. Michigan, Minnesota, California, Oregon, Alaska have all used senators like me to get statehood. And that's what we're attempting to do here. And, as Charles has pointed out, this is horrible that the people of the District of Columbia uh, have had their rights stolen. Thomas Jefferson told us that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that these rights were given us by God. And that's all. We're not asking for any favors or any dispensations. We're asking only for the rights that Congress stole from us 220 years ago. So this is a really moral fight for the most basic rights of our democracy, and that is the right to representation. And we must make it part of the national narrative about voter suppression. This is the clearest example, in my opinion, of voter suppression in America today. We have over 400,000, no, approximately 350,000 African Americans in the District of Columbia who have no voice in their national legislature, and another 350,000 people that are also part of that equation, part of that community. And that really needs to change. Our first um, our first delegate to Congress, and this is another thing, we have a delegate to Congress. Her name is Eleanor Holmes Norton, and she too has no vote in the House of Representatives. In a minute, you're going to meet a great representative from the District of Columbia, Franklin Garcia, who had the position of representative. I'm the senator, and he was the representative, and he's going to talk to you about that. But we have no representation in either house. And our first delegate, the person that preceded Eleanor Holmes Norton, the Reverend Fauntleroy, used to say that the problem for the District of Columbia was the 4 twos, that we were too black, too liberal, too Democrat, and too urban. And that should not be a reason for us not to have the same rights that every American citizen has, and the same rights that everybody in a democracy in every country of the world has. We're the only world that does this. Let me tell you that as our bill passed through the House of Representatives, and I'll let Franklin talk about the bill, but there were some absolutely ridiculous comments made by the Republicans who oppose us. They said at one point that we couldn't be a state because we didn't have an airport or we didn't have a car dealership in the District of Columbia. We weren't we weren't real people in the District of Columbia, as if that wasn't insulting enough that they've taken away our rights. And then they say we're not even real people like other American citizens. Well, I've got news for the Republicans in Congress. 45 states entered the union without a car dealership or an airport. And I know this because the automobile and the airplane had yet to be invented. So the arguments have gone from the ridiculous to the insulting to the absurd. And what it really comes down to is 2 more Democrats. The Republicans don't want 2 more Democrats in the Senate, which would give us solid control rather than a 50-50 split. And they're fighting with everything they got to keep that from happening. And it's time for us to stand up. Unfortunately, on our end of things, we're trying to negotiate with people that don't want to negotiate. We go up and we say, oh, they say it's not constitutional for the District of Columbia to be a state. We have firmly established that it's constitutional, because what our bill does is it takes the District of Columbia, if you know the enclave clause in the Constitution, it says that Congress will have exclusive legislation over the district, not to exceed, over the nation's capital, not to exceed an area that's 10 miles square. But it doesn't say how small the federal government can be. So we shrink the size, the land area of the federal government down to the White House, the Capitol, and all the federal buildings on the mall. So Congress still has absolute control over the nation's capital, and we take all the residential areas of Washington D.C. and we make it a new state, and we give the people the same rights. We finally make Washingtonians equal. Now, some people say we're too small to be a state. That's another argument, but we are in fact bigger in population than Wyoming and Vermont. So we have enough people to be a state. We've paid our dues for 220 years, and statehood is really the answer to our representation and also control of the district and the lives of the people that live there. So we need to make this a national movement. We need to make it part of the voting rights narrative, of the voter suppression narrative, and we need the help of people like you to do it. If we could have bestowed statehood upon ourselves, we would have done it 150 years ago. But we can't. We need every American to stand up and say, this is wrong. This violates every principle of democracy, every principle that our country was founded on. We were founded on the idea of no taxation without representation. And to have it still exist in our nation's capital is a national disgrace, and it's a stain on the American flag. We go all over the world criticizing people that deny the people of their country, their citizens, equal rights. And it's about time that America stood up and faced this and changed it once and for all. And you know, if we do this, you will not only enfranchise 700,000 people, you will literally enfranchise millions of people, because nobody that's ever become a state has ever had statehood taken away from them. So once we become a state, once you establish a state, you will not only get the rights that my great, 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 great grandfather fought for me, you will pass those rights on to my children and my great grandchildren and generations to come. So thank you so much for giving us time to talk about this. And thanks. And I hope that each and every one of you will stand up with us and demand the promise of democracy, which is equality. Thank you.
Senator Brown, thank you so much. And I just want to let you know that I believe it was, I'm forgetting the number. Let's see if I have it up. I do. 1,544 emails, calls, and tweets went into Senator Peters and Senator Portman's office on Monday, demanding that they allow you to speak in the statehood hearings. We found that unconscionable, especially by a committee that is headed up by the Democrats, that they would even allow that to happen. So Senator Brown, Charles, Franklin, we stood with you. The moment we heard about that, I was talking to Charles. I was like, all right, let's get a campaign going. Josie, you would have been so proud. You were on vacation and I just did it myself. Didn't bother you. My deputy policy director, who normally builds these things, was on vacation, and I was like, we're going to do this. So yes, we stood with you. Thank you very much. I am now going, I'm now going to bring up Franklin Garcia, who is the district rep. And Franklin, I'd love you to speak with our activist.
Thank you so much. Can everybody hear me?
Oh, yes.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so very much, Ms. Andrea Miller. I too want to express my admiration for your work. And thank you so much for providing this platform for us to address this important issue. And let me thank the Center for Common Ground also, and everybody who is out watching us tonight. I am one of the founding members of the Douglas Commonwealth Coalition. I am very honored to have that privilege. And I'm also the 8th elected representative. And you heard that a little bit of the history of how we came about. Our positions were authorized through a state convention back in the early 80s. And a decade later, we started electing members of that delegation, to include the Honorable Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr., who was one of our first elected senators. What I wanted to do is I wanted to share with you some key numbers that we have, and I'm going to share that on my screen right now. I think the technology allows me to do this. And I just wanted to go quickly through some of these key elements that we have here and why we are asking for statehood. And you hear this in different forms over and over from different people, but we can't stress them enough. We serve in all branches of the military, over 30,000 veterans we currently have in DC. We pay more federal taxes per capita than any state. You hear this over and over. Taxation without representation is wrong. It's the premise for the creation of our nation. At over $27 billion, we pay more in the aggregate than 22 states. Our budget, almost 17 billion, is larger than 18 states. Our budget has been balanced. At one time, it used to be that we couldn't get our financial affairs in order, but we've had nearly 2 decades of not only balancing our budgets, but surpluses. We have over 700,000 residents. Senators spoke about this, and our population is larger than both Vermont and Wyoming. And we are competing with about 7 states whose population is around 1 million. Now, Ms. Miller talked about the federal enclave. Now, here's the map of the Washington, D.C., the District of Columbia currently, if you can see it on the screen. The portion that we're saying, when we talk about statehood for the District of Columbia, we're not talking about getting rid of your national capital, that is Washington, D.C. All we're saying is simply something that was done already back in 1846. Which is reduce the size of that federal enclave, and it's highlighted here by the darkened area. That would be your capital city, Washington, D.C. And what we're asking is that the remainder, your residential population area, would become the 51st state, or Douglas Commonwealth. And here's what that federal enclave looks like, highlighted, magnified, that is. And then our DC flag, I always wear it every place I go because it is a very, it gives me a sense of pride that we have our own flag, and here it is. Now, the US flag, when we become the 51st state, this is how it will look. The stars are going to line up just perfect. This is the star of the 51st state. Of the United States once we become the 51st state. Let me also share some other facts with you. We are 76% Democrats about, and since 1888, hundreds of hearings have taken place in the US Congress about voting rights for the District of Columbia. We talk about DC statehood. Our struggle for equality has morphed into DC statehood in the last century or so, but ever since Congress took over, this territory in 1801 with the Organic Act of 1801, people have tried all possibility to restore their voting rights. So you can see why we've had that many number of hearings in Congress. Now, here are some key dates. In 1961, we had the passage of the 23rd Amendment to the US Constitution, which allowed Washingtonians to vote in presidential election for the first time. There's a very iconic image of an, I think, 90-plus-year-old man in the Wilson Building. He goes to vote for the first time back in 1964. And it is because he was a Washingtonian who lived in Washington all of his life, and he could vote for nothing prior to that. In 1978, Congress did pass what would have been a constitutional amendment. It would have given the District of Columbia, this wasn't for statehood, it would have given the District of Columbia 2 voting members of the Senate and 1 in the House. Unfortunately, for a constitutional amendment, you need 3/4 of all states to ratify that amendment within 7 years. By the expiration date of August 22nd, 1985, we did not achieve that number. Then in November 1992, statehood, when Congresswoman Norton came in and became our delegate, one of the first things she did is she introduced the statehood bill. And you can see the support wasn't there, 277 against statehood in the House. In September 2014, we had a historical hearing in the Senate. Senator Brown spoke at that. He was one of the witnesses at that hearing. And then in 2016, we had a referendum that showed that over 80% of our population wanted statehood for the District of Columbia. June 2020, again, the House passed HR 51. And this is actually the first time that happens. The statehood bill actually passes the House of Representatives in 2020 with 232 co-sponsors saying yes. And then that happened again recently in April 2021 when it also passed the House of Representatives. And we, as Senator mentioned, and Ms. Miller was so helpful in trying to get him to also testify. We just had a Senate hearing a few days ago. Now, how can you get involved? Here's what a quick list I suggest. You can go, if you are from a different state, or if you're not from DC, you can form your chapter of statehood for support in your state. We have a very popular I-1s for DC statehood, and we have some in other states. We can't have enough of those. Calling your member of Congress is key, particularly your Senate member. That is key right now. You can write about this statehood. I am going to provide this list that I have now here on this website that you're going to see, and I am going to put that website on. I have already dropped that URL on the chat. So that you can use some of these arguments. And this isn't really, statehood for DC isn't really about the citizens of DC only. This is really something that should bother every American or every resident of this United States. And then wanted to mention there's a petition 51 for 51st state. And here's the link. I also dropped that in the chat. And that is because currently, as it stands right now, unfortunately, even if we had all Democrats who are the folks supporting statehood for DC on board, we still would have the cloture rule that requires 60 Senate votes to pass our legislation. And so we're trying to get another exception, just like the ones that happened back in 2012 and 17, that they could allow DC to become a state without bypassing that closure rule. And here's more information. Again, I'm going to drop this on the chat. And of course, this is all about ending taxation without representation. We can't say that enough. It is the basis for the foundation of this nation. The colonies did not think it was right to be taxed without having representation in the British Parliament. And that's exactly what we're saying. thank you again so very much for giving me this opportunity to bring this issue, Ms. Meter. You can take it back. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you. What I'm going to do now is we've got some questions from the audience. So I'm going to bring our three speakers up and we will go through the very first question. And Charles, I'm going to direct this to you. And Charles, here's the question. The question is, can DC citizens get their democratic rights through retrocession to Maryland? A lot of people ask that question.
Yes. Before I answer that question, let me acknowledge our current U.S. representative, Oye Leo. Welcome, Oye. Absolutely not. There are a number of reasons. One, the citizens of Maryland have indicated very clearly that they would never allow DC 712,000, mostly liberal Democrats, into the state of Maryland. It would throw everything off, and the Republicans would never have it. Recently, in doing some research on that, in fact, I found out that it would be absolutely unconstitutional. Article 1, Section 4, Clause 1 of the Constitution states that any state that enters into a contract with the United States government is bound to the terms of that contract. And Maryland gave the current its area that composes the District of Columbia right now. They gave it to the United States of Maryland. I mean of America, without possibility of any return. And so there were numerous lawsuits when Virginia retroceded its part of the District of Columbia back to Virginia, and they brought a lawsuit. Some of those who wanted to go back to DC, and the Supreme Court never ruled on it. So it is clearly unconstitutional because it is a violation of that article. So absolutely not. And also, the citizens of DC have already decided that they want it to be a state. So there are so many reasons why that could never happen.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Second question, and this is about DC's economy. And Franklin, you really gave us a lot of information on that. And this question is, would DC's economy be able to survive without federal assistance? Franklin, do you want to grab that one?
Sure. And this is another argument that we say. But before I do that, let me just add one more part to what Representative Moreland said. One of the arguments when I went to visit many of the Republican members that talked about retrocession, they also said that that Maryland needed to consent to the usage of land being changed. And so what we've always said is that if you look at the people who co-sponsor our statehood bill from the state of Maryland, nearly every member of the congressional delegation, save for one, a Republican member, is on board. At one time, the governor was on board. The legislature, the General Assembly, has a resolution supporting statehood for DC. So it's all there. Now going forward with the issue of economics, what we know is this: we know that no state, no territory that became a state was ever worse off. That we know for a fact. There is this theory that people believe that DC's revenue comes in large parts from the federal government. And so, yes, a little bit of it comes from the federal government because we supply, being the capital city, a number of services to the federal government that other states don't. But all in all, it's been proven over and over that we have more than enough sources of revenues coming into the city to account for our population and to meet our obligations. And we expect that one of the reasons why we want to be independent or be a state is that we believe that we can do a lot better off than we are right now. And it's been proven that territories, after they became states, always prospered, did better than before.
Thank you. There's a term that I heard, Senator Brown, when I was first introduced to you, and I was told that you were the, quote, shadow senator. And I thought, he's the what? What on earth is that? So what does that term mean?
Well,
Let me weigh in on that.
yeah, actually, that's pejorative. It's commonly used today to put us down. I mean, the office, obviously, if the office isn't paid and they won't let me testify in the United States Senate as the United States Senator, which is actually my title. I run on the ballot as the United States Senator. I'm accepted in Washington, D.C. as the United States Senator. And actually, the Democratic Party is supposed to accept my office as equal to a United States Senator. I have been a super delegate for President Obama twice and for Hillary Clinton. I get privileges through the Democratic Party, which made it really astounding that they wouldn't let me testify as they did in 2014. But the term really refers to, and people use it in a pejorative manner, but it really refers to the system of government in England where people that are elected are called shadows until they take office. And that's really what the term originally, when it was originally used hundreds of years ago, meant senator in waiting to be installed. But today it's used to put us down. I think Charles Moreland would agree with me, and so would Representative Garcia, that we never use the term. We call ourselves what the voters elected us to be: United States Senator, United States Representative.
Let me weigh in on that, Andrea,
Oh, go ahead.
for a moment. As Senator Brown said, the names appear on the ballot as United States Senator and United States Representative. Being the first, I can remember when the Washington Post, who never supported statehood, started referring to us as shadow. Well, I have always been clear that that's a derogatory term designed to minimize our quest and our fight for DC statehood. A shadow has no form. A shadow has no substance. Our people are not shadows. And so I would ask everybody, if you hear somebody refer to us as, to our elected representatives, to the senator, either one of our senators or U.S. representatives, as shadows, let them know that that's a derogatory statement designed to put down our movement and keep us disenfranchised.
Let me
Thank
say
you.
one more thing too, Andrea, if you don't mind, and that is that the Republicans keep on trying to characterize this as a power grab for the Democrats, statehood getting 2 more senators in the Senate, but voting senators. But it's never been that for the residents of the District of Columbia. we pushed to expand our rights when Republicans ran the city. And so if it's two more Democrats for some people, it's not two more Democrats for us. It's a matter of justice.
Right. It's voting rights for more than 700,000 people, period. Yes. Yes, that is how we look at it. I've got another question in the chat. Is there a land size limitation for a state? Meaning, is there a minimum size?
No, there's not a minimum size for a state. Uh, there, our system of representation is basically based on population. The Senate, of course, every state gets 2 United States senators, but there are minimum and there are no maximum sizes, but there are minimum sizes for how many people you need to have to qualify for statehood. And the District of Columbia is well over the limit to do that. If we entered the union with 700,000 people, we would enter the union with more people than a third of all the states when they enter the union.
Yes. Yes. Now, one of the things that I want to talk about, we want to look forward, is I want to talk a little bit about the march, and then I want to talk about fundraising for the march. So I am dropping a link in the chat. We're just getting started on this. This is an event campaign. When Charles was speaking, he mentioned that there would be the commemorative march of the March on Washington on August 28th. The link that I dropped in is what we're building, so that if you want to have a local solidarity march, now that people are going outside again, now that they are doing public events again, we are building this out. If you sign up early, we will send you all the extra stuff that we add in. We won't allow you to miss anything. And we'll be looking for groups all over the country to show solidarity. We don't expect people to get on airplanes. People in Maryland, people in Virginia, you can drive up. But also, if you'd rather host a local event in your home state, that works too. So that's what I put in the chat. So all about the march. Do you want to talk about where the march is going to be in DC, the big one, and some of your plans for it?
Yes, on August the 28th, the weekend, starting Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and possibly Monday, we're going to have what we're calling the Dream March on Washington for DC statehood, green jobs, and justice. This is a 3-issue coalition where there are a number of progressive organizations that have decided to organize around statehood and those 3 issues. And we're going to have on Friday, we're going to have an awards event. Uh, uh, and on Saturday, we're going to have the main march, which is going to be at the National Mall. That's going to be the main gathering point. But we're going to have 2 satellite gathering points, one at Freedom Plaza and the other one at the Capitol. So we're going to march, DC citizens are going to march from Freedom Plaza down to the National Mall. And then that evening, we're going to gather in front of the Capitol. And that's going to be a Veterans for DC Statehood event. And it's going to end up with a Hands Around the Capitol candlelight march for DC statehood. So we're inviting everybody to come. I posted earlier our website, www.douglascommonwealth.us. On the site, you can sign up as your organizations. We want organizations to sign up as supporting organizations. We're recruiting volunteers. I think Franklin has the site, but I'm going to post again the website and ask everybody to go on the website. We're also going to have a virtual march. So we're asking everybody in every state, if you cannot come, we have a number of events in the states. For instance, we're going to have in the major cities, we're going to ask people to organize a march and even marches in the state capitals around these three events. Every speaker is going to speak about the importance of DC statehood and also going to speak about the importance of green jobs and justice. Uh, this this movement is very important, and I see Franklin has also on his site the logo for the Dream March. But this weekend is very important, and we're organizing and gathering in commemoration of the 1963 March on Washington. Uh, right now, uh, it's so important that we organize to save the world. It's not just for DC statement, but there are so many important issues that are being decided on every day. The COVID-19 relief and the plans, the government plans for addressing this pandemic, uh, global warming, and all these justice issues. I wake up every day disturbed, to say the least, that I have no voice in the decision-making process. And and I do believe, certainly if we had two Democratic senators from the District of Columbia, we wouldn't have to worry about Joe Manchin uh, leveraging his power with the Democrats, and we'd have at least 50 Democrats, and we could pass some of these important bills that are now before the Congress, the Senate, and the House.
You know, and we shouldn't forget what Dr. King taught us, right? That the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. But how quickly it bends and how effectively it bends depends on how many people are willing to stand up and temper it. So I think the time has come for us to come together, as Charles said, over not only statehood, but green jobs, justice, and the whole progressive agenda.
And Senator Brown, thank you very much for that, because that really is very important to us. And I'm noticing now that many of our faith partners, in addition to either their racial or social justice committees or areas, are now bringing out climate justice areas. So we are really taking, what pleases me, a far more holistic attitude toward how we are going to govern ourselves, that we really need to look at, as you say, the green jobs, and we need to look at all of the justice issues. And of course, we cannot forget that, because it's in our face every day, that we have to really deliver on voting rights and voting rights for everybody. I see a note from Harvey saying, don't forget to mention that the goal is to install solar panels on the White House. They are hoping to deliver solar panels to the White House. So I think that's really great. So yes, thank you. Looking forward to seeing that. All right, I'm going to say, any last questions, get those dropped in the chat. We are scanning for them right now. I love that. Thank you. Make the White House solar again.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, yes. Make the country just. Now, we also want to let everybody know that we are recording this video. It will be edited, released on our YouTube channel. And when we have the video ready, you will get an email, everyone that registered, that will have the meeting notes from this meeting. It will have all the links that we shared with you in the chat. All of that will come out and you will get it. It may not be tomorrow, it may be Saturday, but normally we have managed, courtesy of Luis, to get the video out literally the next day. So thank you all for joining. A very special guest to Senator Brown. How many years ago did we meet? You were either I met you and then had you be a speaker at my round table, or maybe I met you at the round table and you were, of course, speaking on statehood. You're muted, unmute.
It couldn't have been too long ago because you look exactly the same, even though I've become old and decrepit here. But no, I think it was certainly, we did a event together in Philadelphia. I remember at the convention. And so I would say about 10 years ago, Andrea. And again, I so admire you for the work you do. You have been an inspiration to me. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Franklin. It is a pleasure to meet you. I cannot wait to join you in the trenches in this fight, get to know you better. We will win, we shall overcome. And Mr. Charles hanging out back there, thank you so very much for putting all of this together. This is going to be incredible. What DC will be able to show the rest of the country will be really incredible. So thank you all.